Allow me to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Pieter Labuschagne. Peter began his Christian ministry as a Sunday school teacher in 1986. I'm sure that some of us were not born during that particular year, and then served as a pastor and a missionary. As a theologian, he has held various positions, including lecturer, postgraduate supervisor, registrar, principal, and course curriculum developer. As a researcher, he is interested in missiology, the Old Testament, and cultural studies. He is a member of the Southern Africa Missiological Society, or SAMS as it is shortened or abbreviated, and of the International Association for Mission Studies. Currently, he leads the course development team at the South African Theological Seminary, which includes course writing, course review, and online course development. This role requires a balance of theological knowledge and also technical skills. His being a lecturer and a postgraduate supervisor add the advantage of gaining an understanding of how the courses that his team designs are experienced by students. So let's welcome to the lectern this afternoon, Dr. Pieter Labuschagne. Over to you, Pieter.
Thank you very much, Pelham. It's a great privilege to share with you this afternoon in this session on academic integrity. As was already mentioned, I work with a course development team where we are responsible for a lot of technical things on Canvas and the courses that students do. So my purpose this afternoon is to just help you see a broad picture of assessments at SATS. So basically, there are two things, but I will develop it in three parts. The first one is that I will look at assessments, and then I will look at grading and feedback. So assessments, the different types of assessments, different types of grading, different types of feedback. So let's kick off with the assessments. We basically use three kinds or three types of assessments on Canvas. That is our learning management system. That's where you as a student access your courses. The first one is a normal written assignment that is usually an essay. In an essay, you have some elaborate explanation, description of what is expected of you, and one would assume that you write a nicely developed essay with an introduction, a conclusion, some references. It's a longer piece of work where you need to do quite a bit of research. It's often these assessments that count quite a few marks as well, because they are more lengthy and more engaged. The second kind of assessment is the discussion. Discussions are shorter in general, so you are expected to post a short message, maybe 300 words, 400, 500 words, a short discussion post, and then you have access to other students' discussions. So that is a difference between essays and discussions. The essay is a longer written assignment that only your lecturer can see, and only your lecturer will mark. The discussion is a shorter post. You can read other students' discussions, and you are usually expected to reply, to engage with other students' discussions. The last type of assessment is the quiz. It's usually short knowledge checks. We use it for tests or exams, and it's shorter questions. True and false, matching, find the right answer, that kind of thing. So just as a quick overview, a quick introduction to the types of assessments you will encounter at SATS. When we look at the types of grading, there are different ways we use assessments. Some of them are graded. So it's a summative assessment. We read what you write, we evaluate that, and we give you a mark that usually counts to your course grade at the end of a term. Sometimes an assessment is not graded, so you're not getting a mark, 5 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10, but the lecturer will simply indicate if you completed the task. So there's a complete, incomplete attached to that assessment. And then you also get non-graded assessments. And the purpose of that is to be formative. So we want you to learn as you do those. Often we have quizzes that are formative in this sense. So it's not graded. It doesn't count to your final course grade, but you can do it over and over so that you learn in the process. And then you have auto-graded assessments. Usually those are the quizzes. You complete your quiz, you hit the submit button, and you get your mark immediately. I know 1 or 2 quizzes at SATS have some shorter questions, short paragraph type questions that your lecturer has to mark before you get your final mark. But in most cases, a quiz is auto-graded and you can get your result immediately. So just for you to understand, what I must say just at this stage, irrespective if an assessment is graded or marked as complete, incomplete, or non-graded, if there's an assessment in your course, it's there with a specific design. It is like the next step you take. So you write a quiz that might count to your final grade. Then you have another assessment that might not count. But that assessment will enable you to master the material, understand the flow of a course, and do better in the next assessment. So it's very important that you do all these assessments with the same rigor and commitment. So we looked at the types of assessment, we looked at types of grading, and then lastly, I want to say something about the types of feedback. Many of your assessments will have a rubric attached. So when you read the assignment instructions, also go and look at the rubric. The rubric usually follows the assignment instructions. So if your assessment wants you to discuss 3 points, then your rubric will usually reflect those 3 points as well, and you will be graded accordingly. So the rubric is there to help your lecturer grade, but it's also there for you to understand what we expect from you in that assessment. There's also the possibility for lecturers to make general comments. So when they grade your work, it's a little block where they can type in and they can make general comments to you. So in the rubric, you get your marks. Let's say the rubric item counts 10. You will see you got 8 out of 10. And then there might be a place where your lecturer can write something. So it's important to look at that and learn from that. General comments, as I already said, is something that your lecturer can complete when they grade your assignments. There's also in-text comments. So when you submit an essay, for instance, as a written assignment, your lecturer can insert comments in the text of your assignment. And all of that helps you to understand what you've done maybe wrong, or what you can improve on, or what you've done very well. So what I want us to do now, I'm going to mute myself, and then we're going to demonstrate some of this, especially the grades and the feedback. So there's a little video, it's about 10 minutes, just to help you see where you can find feedback, how you can find your grades as a student. I hope that will help you. Thank you. There are different ways in which you can view your grades and your lecturer feedback. I'm going to show you my preferred route. When you're in your course, you will see the course menu on the left-hand side. You simply click on grades, and that will give you a summary of all the grades in that course. On the left-hand side, you have a name of the assessment and also the type of assessment. It tells you below the assessment if it was an essay or a quiz or what type of assessment. It shows you the due dates. It will show you if you submitted anything late. It gives you your score. And then it has a whole lot of little icons on the right hand side. So let me show you what these icons mean. I'll go to this one, task 1, what is going on. There's a little icon that refers to your rubric. So when you click on that icon, you see your rubric, the marks awarded for every criterion in the rubric, and some comments to help you understand why you got the mark that you got. There's also another little icon next to it, which leads to the general comments by your lecturer. So when you click on that, you will see that your lecturer made a general comment there about your submission. And then next to that, you have a color block that says originality report. That refers to the plagiarism software and what score you received. So if you click on it, the report will open in another tab and you will be able to see your similarity index. In this case, there's a 5.9% similarity. And when your lecturer pages through it and he looks at the highlighted sections, the lecturer will then decide if it's serious or not. In this case, it's actually very well done by the student. So just from your grades overview or summary page, you can learn a lot. Your mark, your rubric, general comments, and your plagiarism similarity. That is the easiest way, and as I said, my preferred way to look at grades, because I have it all there gathered together. There's something else you can also do that is quite helpful. So if I take that same assignment, task 1, what is going on, but I click on the actual assignment, you will see that there's a hyperlink. When you click on it, it's underlined. So when I click on that assignment, it will take me to the submission page where you submitted your assignment initially. It tells you that it was submitted on 27 February at 2:53. It shows you the similarity score of 5.9 and it gives you the result for that particular assignment. You can also click on View Feedback to see the general comment again. On the same page, when you scroll down, you will see the rubric with the marks awarded and the comments that your lecturer made. If you scroll down even further, you will see your actual submission that you submitted on the platform, and there your lecturer can also make some additional comments. I think I'll stop here just to show you that you go to grades to see the summary. And then when you click on an individual assignment, it will take you to the submission space where you can get more information and more feedback. In this case, you will see that the lecturer actually made quite a few comments in the text that you submitted. Your introduction cannot just be one sentence. It would be a window into your essay telling us your essay statement and how you hope to argue the case out. So the lecturer gives some advice. The lecturer helps the student to understand what went wrong and how they can improve. Just as we close, when you look at the grades summary page, what is displayed is the grade summary for the course you are currently in. However, from the grades page, you can look at any of your courses. So if you click on the course drop down, you will see all the courses that you've completed. Let's say I click on Biblical Worldview, I click on Apply, it will take you to that course and you can see what were your results in Biblical Worldview. If I go to How to Study the Bible and I apply it, I will go to that course, I will see the summary of that particular course. So the grades menu is quite a powerful one in Canvas, and from there you can branch out to get more feedback and more information on your grades and lecturer comments. Willem, that comes to the end of my section. I don't know if we want to take questions at this time or if people want to ask questions later. It's all up to you.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Dr. Labuschagne. We will be taking some questions at this moment in time. So if you have any question, please type it in the chat box. I was anticipating that you will say a few more things after the demonstration. So I was caught a little bit off guard there with regards to just notifying the students and the faculty and the staff that they can start typing their questions. So the presentation was a little bit technical in nature, as we all heard, and it helps us to understand how to make best use of the Canvas platform. There are many institutions that are using Canvas, and we have heard many a times some sentiments being expressed that it hasn't been used to its full capacity. But we have tried our very best as a seminary to exhaust the offering of Canvas. And so Dr. Labuschagne demonstrated today how we use it in terms of assessment and feedback. So if there are any questions from the students, we would like to request that you start posting them in the chat box. And if you are a staff member or an academic at the seminary, we also ask that if you have any questions for Dr. Labuschagne with regards to some clarity uh, of his presentation, we would like for you to ask that particular question. So I see there are some people beginning to type.
Well, maybe I can say while we wait,
Okay.
I think it's quite important to look at feedback. I know we're all under pressure, and sometimes when I look at student submissions, it happens 5 or 10 minutes before the due date, and then you run again because you must answer the next one. But it's in the feedback that your lecturer gives you that there's a lot of learning, and often I see that students improve as they go on because they learn from the feedback. So maybe just as a emphasis again, the feedback is there as an additional tool for the student to learn.
Thank you for that, Dr. Labuschagne. In my experience at SATS, I know that many a times the students they more interested in the mark. That is for them, feedback is really about the mark. It's not about the formative feedback that they receive to help them improve. So I am grateful for that particular reminder that students are invited to look at the feedback and also to look at the feedback very closely in order for them to improve their academic writing skills. So just a question from my side, Dr. Labuschagne, and this one might not be as technical in nature, but let me just ask in terms of um, the browsers that you use, and Canvas, how you access Canvas, which browsers would you recommend is perhaps the best that we can make use of when we open up our Canvas platform?
Mm. It seems that Chrome works very well with Canvas. I myself use a MacBook, so I use Safari, that is the Mac browser. But there are certain features that do not work so well. So if I do an announcement and I want to add a recording, it doesn't want to do it. So I have to switch to Chrome, and then I can do it in Chrome or insert my video in a different way. So I would say to students, use Chrome. That is the most stable browser for Canvas. You shouldn't have problems using Chrome. Yeah.
Thank you for that response. We have a question from our next speaker, from Dr. Candida Millar, and she's asking, Dr. Pieter, would you kindly explain the submission of discussions that require one to respond to other students' posts that are only visible once they have submitted? How long does it take to see other students' posts, and how long do they have to submit it?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's a very important question. Our default setting on due dates is that 7 days after the due date, an activity closes. So if you submit your discussion on the due date, you will still have 7 days to reply to other students. After the 7 days, the activity might close and you won't be able to reply to students. The, the pedagogy behind one of the questions that Dr. Millar asked is that you cannot read other students' replies before you post it. Because then you can just read their replies and put a few things together and don't do your work. So you need to formulate your response and post it. Now, the moment you post it, you will see other replies if other students have posted. Of course, if you are the first student to post, there will be nothing to view. So if that happens, that you post and you don't see other replies, just come back after the due date, because then other students would have posted theirs, and try to do it within that 7-day window after the due date. That applies to your discussions.
Thank you. So the 7 days after the the day that you have posted, is it 7 working days, or do they include weekends? Maybe you can just help us with some
Yeah,
clarity there.
yeah, it's just 7 24-hour days. So your due date is usually midnight on a Monday, and it will stay available till midnight the next Monday. So it includes
Okay.
weekends.
Okay, so it includes weekends. So if the students can maybe just make a note of that, that it is 7 consecutive days since the day that you were due to submit. Then also, if I hear you correctly, you are actually saying that the fact that you cannot see other students' posts before you post has an academic integrity component built into it. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct, because it then it makes sure you submit your own work. It makes sure you work through the material, gives you an opportunity to learn, and then you see their reply. So there's definitely that component built in.
Okay, and then we have a question from Lisa Labuschagne, your significant other, uh, and she says, thank you for your insightful contribution. I believe that heeding feedback plays a crucial role in the student's growth in academic integrity. Do you agree? And if you do agree, would you please explain? I would add.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that, because I find sometimes that a student writes an assignment, uh, and it's not only first year students. Sometimes you have postgraduate students who come from other disciplines. So maybe somebody is an engineer or doctor, or some comes from another field where you had different types of assessments. Now suddenly you must write an assignment, you look up resources, you copy certain things from resources. Maybe you forgot to cite it. Maybe you don't know how to properly cite references. So when I write to you in your first assessment and I warn you and I say, please pay attention to diligently indicate where your information came from. Please give credit to your authors, learn to paraphrase, and I might give a student an example of how to do it. When the student applies that in the next instance, then obviously they learn how to cite better, they learn how to use references, they learn how to give credit to people when they use their material. So that's one way just to illustrate how uh, paying attention to the feedback will help you to show more integrity in your writing.
Thank you for that response. We have a question from Dr. Candida again, and she is asking: is there an academic integrity component to the responses students post to other people's submissions, or is this more academically casual?
Thank you, Dr. Millar. It's a good question. The purpose of the replies on posts is usually to engage with the other student. So I would assume that as you study the subject matter, you have a certain view that you express in your post. When you read another student's post, they might have identified something that you missed. And that gives you the opportunity to say, uh, this what you wrote here was really meaningful to me. I missed it in my submission, and I think it adds value to the understanding of this particular concept. So I would like students to engage with what the other said from the background of what they learned. Some discussions actually give details. They would say, when you reply to the student, uh, reflect a bit on uh, the how well the student mastered this topic, maybe ask a challenging question to the student. So I don't expect the student to have references in their reply. You don't have to go and study that reply in that kind of depth, but it's always good to see that you engage with the other student. And you, in some discussions, I find that a whole conversation starts where a student would comment, and then the other student would reply, and there's a little bit of a kind of sharing of ideas. That's actually ideal. So yeah, it's maybe academically casual in the sense that I don't expect you to answer the other student with quotes from your reading material, but it's still an academic activity where you engage with their understanding of the material.
Thank you for that answer. Maybe a question from my side, just to reflect on the discussion posts. It's sometimes students are not thinking critically, and it seems to be more casual. And I know that there are some prompts when it comes to the discussion where we encourage students not to break one another down. But
Mm.
how can we, or how can a student critique the work of another student without breaking him or her down if they perhaps disagree, or if an argument is weak, if it's not coherent, and if it lacks logic? Maybe if you can speak to that a little bit for us.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I had a student recently who critiqued another author, but actually just criticized the author. And I said to the student, there's a difference between critically engaging and and criticizing. So uh, a good example, I had a student who replied to another post, and he was very polite. He said, uh, your first comment about X, Y, and Z really made me think, because it doesn't fit within my theological framework. In my denomination, we don't think that way. And as I read the material, I didn't see this. Uh, and I don't know if I'm blinded by my own denomination, or uh, if you read too much into it. So he kind of left it open and said to the student, would you mind engaging a bit more? But he was very polite about that. Um, so I think it's important that just a common courtesy to others to say, uh, I think you've done well. What I do, let me maybe make it personal. When I reply to a post, I try to compliment the person first and say, thank you for your post. I liked this, this, and that. So it's not just a general compliment, but I pick something from the uh, post that I think is really on the money. And then I would, if there's something else, I might say, I have a slight different view on this. How do you see this? And I like it if a conversation starts then. But I think it's very important. I usually, and I think all our staff, if a student um, oversteps the line, they would usually be gently reminded to not uh, commit character assassination. It's not against the person, but it's an engagement with what they posted.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and in many circles we hear about the sandwich approach, and so you say something positive or something good, then you provide constructive suggestions, not necessarily criticisms, and then you conclude again with something positive, almost as if it is like a final blessing that
Mm,
you give to the person. We
mm,
have a question here from Sheba. And she says, thank you for the presentation, Dr. Peter. Dr. Candida asked something I was not sure about. However, I have submitted replies to students within the 7 days of the due date. But what happened was my lecturer marked my assignment before I posted the replies. Therefore, I did not get the marks for it. Is this something I can message my lecturer directly to ask her to remark that section? Thank you.
mm. Yes, I would say contact your lecturer directly. I've been guilty of it myself, even in this term. I want to have a quick turnaround on assessments, so when students submit it, I try to mark it in good time so that students don't wait too long for the answers. And I did sit down with one of the discussions, maybe 2 days after the due date, and I marked them. And there were a few students who either didn't reply at all or only made one reply. And I said, it's a pity you lost marks here. And then I realized there's still days left. So I said to the students, if you do it before this date, when the 7 days close, I will mark it. So from a lecturer's perspective, I decided to wait a bit with discussions to make sure people get an opportunity to mark it. But yes, to this student, just chat to your lecturer and ask the lecturer to just go back and give that mark.
Thank you for that. I'm sure that that answers the question. We have a question from our very own Michelle Kleinhans, and she says, Dr. Labuschagne, is it worth mentioning that there is a 5% a day penalty applied on the initial post in discussions and essay assignments within
Mm.
the 7 days if an extension has not been granted?
Mm. Yes, so the due date is the date that your assignment must be submitted. If you miss the due date for any assignment, you're going to be penalized by 5% per day. So if I do a quiz a day late, I'm going to lose 5%. If I submit my initial post on a discussion a day late, I'm going to lose 5%. If I submit my essay a day late, I will lose 5%. Now, discussions are a little bit different. The due date applies only to your initial post. So if your initial post is late, you will be penalized. But if your initial post is submitted before the due date, there's no late penalty. You have then the 7 days to still make the reply. So the replies do not affect your late penalty. It is your first post on your discussion that you must make sure you submit it before the due date.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. There is more of a comment or a contribution from Dr. Candida. And she says, I have noticed many of the counseling course lecturers use the following suggestions for discussion forums. Maybe it is helpful to the audience. Respond to at least two other students' posts meaningfully in the following way. Read through the person's submissions. And I think I can add and say, read the thoughts after the author and don't read into it what is not there. So read it very closely. Then read and comment on something that stood out to you. Three, add to it or respectfully challenge their thinking. Link your comment to the lectures reading, the reading, use a reference, close with an encouragement. I think that's very, very good advice. And Yeah, it's similar to what we refer to as the sandwich approach. But I know the sandwich approach, sometimes people say, I know they're complimenting me, but they're actually setting me up for that critique, and to make me not feel bad, they say something good at the end, but let's see if we can come up with a better methodology of how to do that. Um, then Michelle Kleinans once again says most of our discussions include the following statement regarding responses. Responses should be meaningful post, engage with, reflect upon, learn from, build upon, critique and or challenge the other students' post, and seek to further the discussion. I think that's very, very important. And that is also an element of academic integrity. So sometimes we have what we call a straw man's argument. So we just think that what we're saying is basically true, but there are actually gaps and weaknesses. And the discussion forums actually helps us to think through our own academic writing and our thinking. And if there are gaps in terms of there is a straw man, then obviously we need our discussion forums to help us reflect deeper and think perhaps more broadly. But then we also have what we call a steel man argument, where people will try and argue in such a case as if their argument is watertight or airtight. And there is nothing that is basically in that particular argument that can be critiqued. And so we just need to be careful with the discussion forums and just make sure that ultimately we honor Christ in terms of how we respond, but at the same time engage critically in the discussion and the post of the other student. Then there's Annie that says, thank you, Dr. Labuschagne, for the informative presentation, especially with special reference to your comment on strategic feedback when replying to the post. So, a wonderful compliment there. Nomonde asks, how compassionate is SATS on late submission due dates in relation to the inconveniences of load shedding in South Africa? Over to you, Dr. Labuschagne. And I think this will be the last one before we
I was
move
going
on
to
to
say you
the
should
next.
answer it because you're a program coordinator, but maybe can I take a detour as I answer that? I've been a student myself, so I know how a student operates. Remember that the due date is the last moment that you could submit it. You should not wait for the last minute. It's actually better if you could work diligently and submit it a day or two before. In my courses, if somebody submits early, they even get their mark early. So try as far as you can not to wait for that absolute cutoff, because if you're working 10 o'clock at night and you think, yes, I have 2 hours to finish this, and then load shedding happens, you are going to be late. I had a student who sent me a note and said, I had load shedding. I asked the student where he lived. I said, can you send me some proof from an app or from something that at that time you had load shedding? Which he did. He sent me a screenshot. He said, this is where I live. I genuinely had load shedding, and I was compassionate on the student. Usually the lecturer can just give an extension for illness or death in the family. So those things get referred to the program coordinators just to make sure that we're fair on all students. But we are aware that it is a challenge, and so build that into your planning. Don't wait for the last minute. And if something happens, don't wait 3 days and then tell your lecturer, I had load shedding. Write the message immediately. Say, listen, this happened. I was halfway with my quiz. That shows also integrity on your side.
Thank you so much, Dr. Labuschagne, for your presentation and for the wisdom that you've shared with us this afternoon around academic writing, with the lens leaning towards academic integrity. Lorraine, I think your question that you posted will be answered in the next session. So let us switch gears here for a little bit. So thank you, Dr. Labuschagne,
Thank you.
and we value your time and your expertise as our course development team leader here at MySATS. Allow me to introduce our second speaker. Dr. Candida Millar is of Dutch American descent, married to a Scottish man, and is presently living in South Africa, having worked and studied in both Australia and the United States. After completing a double major in Christian leadership and psychology in the USA, Candida felt that God was calling her to return home to South Africa to complete her master's in theology with a specialization in narrative pastoral care and counseling. She is she completed, her doctorate through the South African Theological Seminary. As a pastor, Candida has a passion for preaching, and as a counselor, appreciates both narrative counseling and logotherapy as effective counseling modalities for the African context, and thus advanced certifications in both models of practice, both in the office and outside of the office. She is wife to Grant Millar and a mother to 3 teenagers. Candida's presentation has been pre-recorded, so she will join us for the Q&A session after we have listened to her pre-recorded presentation. Enjoy.
Good afternoon and welcome to session 2 of the symposium. This session is about academic integrity in alternative assessment styles. Why is this session important? Well, in some courses, you may be asked to submit a symbolic representation video or an audio, a PowerPoint, or maybe even a creative expression. Now, all the counseling students in the room know about these sorts of things, but for some of you, this might be brand new information. I think it's important to remember that these alternative assessments are still academia. It's the same thing you've heard in all the previous sessions, but it's channeled differently. We're adding a bit of color, and when we're adding a camera, it doesn't change the fundamentals of academia. It's still important to have academic integrity. It still needs to show learning. Assessments are there to showcase your learning, the integration of that learning then into application. So are you different because of the course you took? And how will your lecturer know that? And in what ways can we show that maintains that academic integrity? So hopefully this short presentation can offer you a few ideas on being academic, showing learning, and being professional in your submissions. We don't have enough time to consider all the alternative assessment types, so we will home in on the video and the audio. And then you can glean help from this, hopefully, for your other kinds of assessment styles. Okay, so this is a very basic agenda. Sick, hopefully we're not going to get sick. We're going to wrap again, and then hopefully we can do a demo through the whole process to be able to show you exactly where these things are. So let's use maybe some language that we actually understand. The student information kiosk is an important place to find resources. I'm going to take you there in a moment. We're going to talk about the first wrap, which is read, ask, plan. The second wrap, which will be record, ask again, and then do a post check. And then we're going to do a little demo, like I said, throughout the whole thing. So let's just start quickly at the student information kiosk. Now, the student information kiosk you can find by going down the green bar on the left side of your course and then clicking on student guides. And you will see a bunch of student guides here. These are fantastic for academic integrity. Go through them, learn how to do the stuff that you're called to do or asked to do in your assessments. Okay. One thing I wanted to show you, go back to the information kiosk and come to tutorials and workshops. In the tutorials and workshops, you're going to see this lovely section here on doing PowerPoints. Okay, so that assessment style has been covered in the resources in your student information kiosk. Okay, so take a look what's there, and often there are new tutorials uploaded there. And if you come across a tutorial that you would like to see there that is not there, please let us know. We can either create one or use what you found. Okay, so the student information kiosk is really important. But now what happens if you're asked to do a symbolic video recording or an audio recording, an interview or a creative expression? How do we ensure academic integrity in these types of creative expressions? So let's go back to basics. Read your instructions. I know you've heard this 100 times from your lecturers, but read the instructions and do it in advance. Don't wait. Academic integrity starts right in the beginning, in the planning phases, in organizing your schedule. Read the rubric. If you leave all this too late, you're going to take shortcuts, and taking shortcuts starts to influence your academic soundness. Okay, so I will take you through the one course. One of my favorite courses at SATS is Biblical Basis in the counseling program, undergraduate counseling program. You're all familiar with what the face of the course looks like. Go into assessments and let's select a symbolic representation video. All right. It gives you instructions. It tells you what to do. Remember, there's always a little piece at the bottom. Read through everything. Make sure you take notes on it and understand it. If you don't understand what is being asked of you, please ask your lecturer. That is what they're there for. You do that by clicking on your inbox and writing them a message to say, I'm confused. But don't maybe just say, I'm confused. If you're trying to be academically sound and maturing in your academia, tell them what you think it means. What I'm understanding by this assignment is la, 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 and ask them, please let me know if I'm on the right track or help me shape it. This way, you're forcing your brain to start to mature into your academia. Okay. You've asked the question. You've read firstly, you read the instructions. Always do that first. You've gone through the rubric. But let me show you. I don't know if you know where to find your rubrics before you submit. Go back to your modules page. Come down to the submission space for that particular assessment, click on it, go to the little 3 dots on the far right, click on rubric, and you will see the rubric pop up. Go through the rubric carefully. Okay, this is going to give you significant information to help you with what you need to do in the course. Okay, we'll come back to that in a minute. Let's go back to our notes here. Once you have got an idea about what you are needing to do, it is time to start to plan. Okay, the planning and preparation is really important, and we can't take shortcuts here. This is where a lot of us slip up in our academia. Okay, so what I would like to do is I'm going to show you, and there are many ways to do this, how to do a little storyboard as you're gathering your information for this assignment that you've been given. It's a creative expression, but you still have to do the academia first and write the script, and then you add the creativity. Otherwise, it becomes your impression, your views, your opinion, and you haven't shared who informed those views, and that's where you come unstuck. All right, so let me show you a little document here. All right, let's use this one. Okay, so for entertainment value today, I will be using my stylus. Okay, when you're given an assignment like the one we read, the difference between you are asked to use symbols to explain the difference between biblically based counseling and biblical counseling. You don't have to understand the question, don't worry, this is an example. But you can hear that there's 2 different things that you need to research, Bible counseling and biblically based counseling. So immediately I hear for this particular assignment, I'm going to have 2 spaces that I want to explore. If there were 3 spaces, I would use another one of these, but we don't need that one today. So we'll just get rid of that. And I'm going to draw, let's get blue, shall we? And I'm going to draw a line down the middle, if that can be qualified as a line. What you want to do is you got to go do, like I said, very entertaining, biblical counseling and Bible-based counseling. Okay. You want to invite credible authors around a table. It's a metaphorical table, but you're going to invite them around a table and discuss and ask questions of these authors about these 2 topics. So you can gather your information in a way that starts to develop your academia for this assignment. Okay, so think about who speaks into this topic. Let's pretend you think Collins, a lot of you are familiar with Collins, and you write, okay, this is what is said from Collins, you paraphrase it beautifully. What do I do immediately, even though it's paraphrased? You write Collins, even in your notes, Collins, 2007, I got it from page 66, close brackets. I write it. If you're typing or if you've got an, what do you call it, an electronical workboard, that's fine. Put the in-text citation next to your paraphrasing. You might find a quote that you absolutely love. Make sure, even in your notes, you put it in quotation marks. Why? Because you're not going to remember that it was taken word for word from your notes or from the original source when you come to doing your creative expression. These things slip out of our minds, right? So perhaps you got this one from Van der Spey. So we'll put there, Van der Spey. I'm using all the authors that I'm familiar with. So excuse my writing. Okay, so then I build up all this information with in-text citations as I go. At the end of that, I want to look through it and I want to reflect. Okay, it's not enough to just collect everybody else's views because that doesn't show that you've learned something. We need to see that you've learned something, hence the use of creative expressions. So I would sit here then, I'd reflect on all of what I've found and I would write something about what I understand by that. Okay, what I understand by that and how it impacts my future praxis, right? If I'm talking about counseling, if I'm a pastor, how does this influence what I understand about pastoring? Or how does this influence my understanding of the book of John? Whatever the case may be, I do this. What do I understand by what I've learned? And I write all that down. And guess what? Even here, you want to keep your in-text citations. If you use Collins or you use Meyer et al. Or whatever you use here, because these views, though they are my reflections, they are informed by somebody else. And I got to give credit where credit is due. And this is where our academic maturity starts to grow because we are including ourselves, our voice, into the voices that we have researched. Okay, that shows learning, doesn't it? I do the same on the other side. Also, I might have taken something from Meyer et al. Can't remember the year that was published. Let's pretend it's 1994. Maybe I put Collins around this table as well. Collins is probably 2007, etc., etc. And I do the same on this side. I reflect, what do I understand by what I've learned? And which are the authors that speak to the understanding I have? And I make sure that's all there. Now I have a storyboard of information from which I can start to write my script and add the creative content. But you see how your academic integrity starts right at the beginning, doesn't it? All right, let's close that for now and go back to our PowerPoint presentation. So you plan, you prepare, you write your script based on academia that is sound, it's credible, it's peer reviewed. Okay, ensure that you have cited your sources as you went along and write your script with your sources in it. Okay, you need to make sure that you share who has informed your views. Then you have a script. Now, when it's a video or an audio is a bit easier because you can read your script. Try to sound a little bit more sociable than just reading a script, but I understand you're reading a script if it's an audio, right? If you're doing a video, you're going to need to find a way to line up your script on one side of your screen and your video on the other side of the screen so that you can have your camera square on you while you are going through your script. Again, be careful with how you do that. You'll see, even in this tutorial or this workshop that I'm doing with you today, I will be looking off the center and it's uncomfortable, isn't it? You want to find ways to be looking directly at the camera insofar as it's possible. You certainly don't want your script on the table in front of you and you're doing this or you're holding your script up. That's quite unprofessional, isn't it? And it also distracts from the beautiful content that you want to share with your lecturer so that they can see that you've learned something. All right, so then you add your creativity to it. So you might think, okay, biblical counseling, I'm going to use a candle for, and biblically based counseling, I might use, okay, it's probably not safe to play with fire while I'm doing this workshop. Biblically based counseling, I might be using another symbol for, but I have them ready with me. I have my script written, beautifully academically sound, and it's all ready to go. Then I can go on to my next wrap. Okay, wrap number 2. It's time to record. All right. So insofar as it's possible, and this, for many of you, try to think of this first, record through Canvas. I understand some of the assignments, it's not possible. For the better part, you need to record through Canvas. If you record on an external device, a cell phone or something like that, reduce the resolution. Make sure you're recording on a smaller file so that you can upload it and save it as an MP4. Okay, that's going to help you to actually submit your content. All right, so let me show you how we go about this now. I will be looking slightly to the left. Sorry about that. Okay, let's go back to the modules page. So we go down to where our symbolic video representation video is. I'm going to click on it because that's the submission space. I go down. It actually explains to you how to do it, okay, in your course, which is lovely. Follow the instructions is kind of what we got to come down to. And now you're going to go into the little box where there's an arrow on it. It says the upload or record media. If you have recorded it outside on your cell phone or something like that, you're going to upload into this box, you drag and drop, or you're going to go into the record space. I would prefer, and many of us here would prefer, that you use the Canvas space because the file will be the correct size and it will more than likely upload. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do it here. And unfortunately, I have to use two screens for this presentation today. So I'm going to just switch off my camera quickly so that you can see it on the other side. Okay, so let's see if it will allow us to use a camera here. You make sure you select the correct camera. There I am. You're going to make sure you have the correct mic selected. And you want to make sure you're centered correctly. Okay, so you want to make sure that you've got equal space on both sides of your head, a little bit of space on the around the top as well. This becomes really important. I want to give you a little hint. Make sure you know what is behind you when you are doing this kind of thing. Okay, watch what's hanging on the back of your door. Who's going to walk into the room while you're there? So while your academic integrity might be intact, you might lose your dignity if you're not careful with what is sitting behind you. All right. Also, check your camera. Is it looking square at you, or is it too low? Are you looking up somebody's? Are people looking up your nose? Or they're looking at your head? Consider making sure that you are squared up and straight on. All right. Then you're going to click on record. I have to look off the side, which is very bad for this type of presentation, but it's going to give you a little countdown. And then you're going to go through your script as clearly and concisely as you can, making sure that your symbols are visible. Okay, if you move them too quickly or whatever the case may be, it could become blurry. Don't put them too close or too far. Check that what you're trying to say through your symbols is not only audibly clear, it's visually clear as well. And you make sure that it's there. What you do then, you click on finish. It's that simple. Okay. Check it before you submit it, right? You click play. There it is. Okay, so you check that it is actually what you're wanting it to say. Then you click on Save Media. Clicking on Save Media does not mean that it has been submitted, okay? It actually means that it is busy submitting it, all right? You see the little turning circle while that's happening. And then you see, oh, that's a terrible photo of me. That's okay. That happens, doesn't it? And we would want to go back and fix that, wouldn't we, if we're being professional? And we don't have time to do that today. Make sure you add your bibliography underneath your video. Okay, your video submission, your audio submission, whatever it is. If you have mentioned people in your content, you have to give full references so that people can go and do follow-up research to be able to verify your work, your content. Okay, and then you go down to the bottom, it says post reply. If you do not click post reply, it's not submitted. You have to click post reply. Your video will be there, your bibliography will be there, and then you'll be able to see it in the discussion forum. So make sure you click on post reply. Okay, let's go back to our PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so once you have clicked submit, all right, know your system. All right, go back and check it. You need to go back and check it. The post check is all about asking yourself two questions. Has it submitted? Actually, probably three. Has it been submitted? So you go back and you check, did it actually upload so that your lecturer can find it before the due date, which you would have submitted a few days before the due date, as all good students do in case of load shedding, which reminds me, make sure you check your load shedding schedule. before you start this process. The next question you want to ask yourself is, how will your lecturer know that you have learned something? Is the content in there? Have you answered the question? Is there evidence of learning, actual application learning? They're just not just regurgitating from the texts that you've been given. All right. Be mindful that there is a check for academic integrity, so ask yourself that. Were my informed consent forms submitted if it was an interview? Did I submit that along with my video or my submission or whatever it is? Did I use pseudonames? What about the Puppy Act? Consider the ethics. Ethics is a part of academic integrity, isn't it? Because we're here to showcase what we've learned in a very godly way. We want to make sure the academia is evident and the godliness is evident. Okay, so your post check will check on all of that. If there's an error or a mistake, go back, redo it. Don't allow your work, your name to be tarnished. All right, do excellent work. That is your post check. So I'm going to show you a slide now that I do not expect you to go through. We have a rule at SATS. We do not read slides like this out loud. So I'm inviting you to take a screenshot of that. That is about troubleshooting when you can't get a video or audio to upload. Most of the time it's because the file is too big. And I'm inviting you now to actually make sure that you go through the instructions with your lecturer before you start recording. And we can go into question and answer now. And I appreciate your time and participation today. Take care. Right, that's it from my side for now. Pelham, I'm handing over to you as the chair, and we can take it from there if there are any questions and answers from our audience today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Candida. What a wonderful presentation. I learned a lot, and I'm sure that a lot of the students present in this particular symposium have learned a lot. So please do ask the relevant question as it pertains to this particular presentation. Perhaps if we can start by me asking a question, Dr. Candida, I love the storyboard and the way you've demonstrated that, but can you help us with when do I paraphrase, when do I quote? Because some of our students are speaking English as a second language and even a third language, so for a lot of them, it's easier to quote than to paraphrase. But can you maybe just help us and maybe share your wisdom in when do I quote, when do I paraphrase?
Yeah, thank you for that, Pelham. That's actually a really important question. And I think, as we said in the presentation, how do we showcase our learning? So if we are just quoting, and in fact, even just paraphrasing, have we shown the lecturer that we've learned something? And so for us, especially with AI challenges going forward, trying to maintain academic integrity, we're trying to see, are we doing our job, which is training somebody to be able to do the job they're called to do? And if we don't see evidence of that, that becomes problematic. So paraphrasing is a good idea, and some quotations is a good idea. It depends on how long your presentation or your assignment is. You want to support your views based on what you've learned. And remember that little storyboard, very cheesy little storyboard. It works for me still, even now when I write now, and I've done my doctorate. I still use little storyboards like that, inviting authors around a table and asking questions of them, metaphorically, the table. But then I collect my information and I reflect on it. I want to know, what have I learned from this? How do I put these voices together and start to share what I understand by it? What have I learned from it? And then I still use in-text citations to be able to support how I came to that view. Now that shows learning. It shows that something new has come out of the combined voices that are brought around the table. Into that, I might use a bit of paraphrasing. Into that, I might use short quotes. Not a lot of quoting, guys. Unfortunately, look, we know the textbook. A lot of us have written the textbooks. We don't need to see the textbooks on paper again. We need to show We need you to show us that you have learned something and you are changing towards what it is God's calling you to be and do in this world in a way that's ethically sound. It has academic integrity, but it also has a professionalism. We want you to do the job well, and we need to see that you're transforming en route. And I don't know if that quite answers the question, Pelham, but hopefully we're encouraging people towards academic integrity, but also application of learning. We need to see that people have learned something. That's where AI is not going to help you.
Yep. Thank you so much for that answer. Just to follow up a question, give us percentages here. What will you say is allowable in terms of quotations in a particular assignment? Let's say the assignment is 8 pages, for example. We're looking at around 2,000 to 3,000 words, maybe 8 to 10 pages. What percentage would you say would be allowable in terms of quotations, and then the rest for paraphrasing? Can you
That's
help
a
us
tricky one.
can you help
That's
us
a tricky
in
one.
those
I mean, how many quotes do you need to be able to prove your point? And is there not another way to say what the author has said to support your views? So it is a very small percentage. I don't even know if I can do that, Pelham, to be completely honest. I'd have to actually sit down, look at a paper and do the math. I know that in a good sized paragraph, 2 or 3 authors in-text citations are a good idea to be able to support the developing argument. And then you're still bringing how you have integrated that knowledge in that same paragraph. And in that, you may have a very small quote, 4 or 5 words, because there's no other way to say what the author has said. And it is important to be able to support your view, and nothing else will support your view quite like that particular quote. Then we put it in. If it's a longer quote in a very short paper, we don't even use longer quotes. But in a larger paper, you've got your block quotes and it supports your views. So I like the idea of doing the math. And I'm sure there are some academics in the room who probably have that on hand even. They may have done it. I think of the Joses and the Kevins in our seminary that are good with that sort of thing. But that is a lovely question that maybe we can actually get the math out to the students. But again, sometimes when we have a formula, people sit with the formula to try and get the mark instead of forcing the learning and integrating, reflecting, and trying to get that point across to show, hey, I've learned something. I'm excited about this. I know how to apply it. So I like the idea of the maths, but I'm not sure if it'll be helpful to our students entirely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that response. Very informative, very comprehensive. Another question, maybe just with regards to academic integrity, and I want to stay a little bit on this idea of paraphrasing and quoting, and then also injecting your voice into the argument, because a lot of times at the seminary what we find is students are summarizing the works of the authors, and sometimes, especially when I mark, I will ask the student, where's your voice? I don't see a conversation between you and the sources that you've used. Can you just help us a little bit there? How can you encourage our students to inject their voice? Because you've mentioned it a few times in your presentation. How can we encourage our students to do that a little bit better?
Look, everybody's different, Pelham, but I love the idea of inviting authors around a table because it's a conversation then. So if I have a thought, or I listen and I read my material from the module, for example. So I've gone through all the content, I've done the lectures, I've taken my notes. Then I invite authors around a table. I'm asking questions of those around the table. I know it's metaphorical table, but we got to play the game with ourselves sometimes. And we say, right, if I'll use the same authors, if Funner Space says this, and Collins says that, how do I feel about these two? What do I think about that? And does maybe Maya et al. Support my views better than these two, even though they are maybe in contradiction to each other? I support one, or I have a third view. And then I bring that view in, and like Lisa said in the chat box, we might have to use a quote to support that. But the quote is not just gooid in. You know how we say gooid in sommer net? We don't just throw in a quote that doesn't make sense to what we're trying to have. It's a conversation. It's an academic conversation. And so even when we're writing, and I can give people a framework if they want, a very basic framework. You have your topic sentence. You say, Funner Space says this. paraphrase, Colin suggests that or agrees in this way. And then you start to bring this other view in, or the view that you have in from what you've learned, and who's or what supports that. So you're constantly having this interaction with the different authors that you engaged around the table, and you bring it in. And as you write that, your voice becomes more evident, because you're the one who's calling the conversation to attention, really. You're not just throwing in facts and hoping that it fits. You want the conversation around the table, and then you make it more professional, more academic as you grow it. But those notes in the beginning makes a big difference on what comes out at the end. Then you've actually done the conversation, you've done the time with your authors, and a part of you has been brought into it already. That's why we leave that little section at the end when you're reflecting on the author's conversation. What do I think about this? How does this impact me? How does it impact my future pastoring, my future counseling, whatever it is God's calling me to? How does that impact that? Write that down. And then when you start writing your final academic paper, your voice has already been given voice. Your thoughts have already been given voice, and you pull that together academically. I think that's personally how I would suggest people do it. Invite people around the table.
Thank you so much. I think that's a very, very good answer and a wonderful response. I just want to read into our hearing what Lisa is contributing to our discussion today. And she says, remember, all direct quotations needs to be followed up with an explanation on why you chose this direct quote and how it relates to your argument. So you can't basically finish off a paragraph or a section of your work with a quote. That is not the way to do it. There needs to be commentary or reflection or thoughts documented in light of that particular quote. So that is very helpful. Michelle Kleinans, she's asking, what if the question says, summarize the course material? Do I still insert my voice, i.e. engage with the materials? How would you respond to that, Dr. Candida?
Okay, so now we're getting into spaces where it would be quite, it would depend on the actual assessment. So if you read through what the instructions are, remember that first point, read through, make sure you understand what's being asked of you, even engage a lecturer and let them know, this is what I understand by this instruction. Am I on the right track? To make sure that you're hitting it, because like every lecture is also going to be a little bit different. You've got to learn your lecturer, don't you, to be able to ensure that you bring in your whole self in, but that you're also able to tap into their whole self and their expertise. And so I would honestly check in with the lecturer on that particular thing. We still have to show learning though. So to be able to summarize the course does show that you've interacted with the content. But how do I show that I've learned something, that I can apply it? And that would be something you need to check with your lecturer, because you're right, Michelle, there are courses where it is about summarizing. That is the task. And the task is there to make sure that the student has engaged the content, not necessarily being able to apply it. So check with the instructions and make sure we understand the instructions. That's how I would answer that one today.
Okay, that's very good. Maybe I see there are a few of our staff and also some of our students writing. So let me ask another question just to help the discussion move forward. In terms of the rubric that we have and that we receive as students, how do we use that rubric to help us with our academic integrity? That is to avoid plagiarism.
So I think it's especially with alternative assessment styles, that becomes really important, because you need to grade yourself before you submit your paper. So check on the rubric, how would you grade yourself? You know, in the rubric, it actually gives an explanation of each criterion. To go through that and actually say, have I answered the question? Have I done this part? What would I give myself for this part? Avoiding plagiarism in alternative assessment styles is something that has to be intentional, because you get wrapped up in the creativity. You're busy doing a video, you're busy doing an audio, you forget to mention who informed your views. It happens. And it's mostly unintentional, but if you're caught for plagiarism, you're caught for plagiarism. It's still plagiarism. You submitted a document and you used content that wasn't all your own. And so going through the rubric is going to be important to answer those questions for yourself, and to be sure, though, that you have that academic integrity. So check the little rubric. Most of them say either writing or referencing, or it gives you an idea of what it should be. Ask yourself, have I done the academic work to be able to say this is now my work and I've supported it well from outside sources, academic sources? Sometimes we get a little bit... I want to say the word sloppy. I think it's a bit unfair. A lot of people, we do put a lot of effort into the technical side of the creative expression, but we get a little bit sloppy on the academic side. And we got to be careful with that. It's still academia. And the lecturers are looking for certain things. We can't let plagiarism slide. We can't let things happen that that might harm the student or the school. That's the reality.
Thank you so much. We will entertain one more question, and it comes from Ulrich. He says, thank you, Dr. Millar. I like to approach assignments with what steps is the Holy Spirit leading you? Oh, it's jumping up and down, yeah. Because some people are posting. Let me start again. Thank you, Dr. Millar. I like to approach assignments with what steps is the Holy Spirit leading you to take? How would you view personal testimonies, and how would you propose making use of the above mentioned also as per your presentation? A little bit of a
Hi, Ulrich.
tricky
Nice to
one.
talk to you again.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Pelham. Yeah, it's lovely to hear your voice in another space, Ulrich. This is lovely. So yeah, the Holy Spirit is a big part of the work we do, isn't it? And not only that, but it's that, I mean, God is the one who opens our minds and hearts to content, to knowledge, to wisdom. And we stand on the giants that have gone before us. And so when we put a brick on the wall, it's the wall that others have also put bricks on. And so we build our content on other people's content. And the Holy Spirit is not a spirit of chaos. So everything is orderly. Everything is built one upon the other. And so we bring our part. And of course, the Holy Spirit speaks through people, through our conscience or through our spirit self. And that can err. Sometimes we misinterpret, and sometimes we spot on. The reality is that the Spirit will not be contradictory to the Spirit's work from yesterday or the last year or 10 years ago. So we grow with people, we grow forward, and we go forward with the knowledge that's already been done. So as you feel led by the Spirit, the way I put it in, and maybe this is helpful to you, remember the storyboard I showed you a few minutes ago? If I'm doing a storyboard, right at the end, when I'm reflecting on it, I will share how this impacts me. How is this knowledge or this wisdom impacting me, my future practice? Then I will say, I could even add there, what is the Spirit leading in this space? But I still want to support that. I want to support that with scripture. I want to make sure that I am not misinterpreting what the Spirit is saying and I'm just randomly throwing things out there. We err as humans. God doesn't, but we err as humans. And so therefore it's important for us to dig deeper, find out what the Spirit is saying. How is it connecting to everybody else who's gone before me or those around me who are in academia with me? And we collaborate and we grow forward together. Nothing happens as individuals when you're a believer. Everything is connected. And so you will find support, or if you don't find support, you may need to go back to God and pray a bit more and say, hey, I'm picking this up wrong. What do I do with this? I need more content. Help me understand this more deeply. And that's why we do theological studies, to sharpen that, to shape ourselves. So I would say put it into your storyboard space and make sure that you're not sitting there as an island thinking, okay, I have the one take on truth. It's not going to be reality. Something is going to help you either prove or disprove what's happening for you in that moment. Testimonies also, it depends on the assignment. So if your assignment, and alternative assignments often do include testimonies, if it's yours or someone else's. Of course, if it's someone else's, there's an ethical consideration, isn't there? Interviewing, all of that, your course will share with you. How do you be ethical when you use somebody else's story in your work? Be very careful about sharing other people's content, testimonies, without ethical clearance for that. But otherwise, the Spirit is the guide, the lead, the transformer, the one that's changing and transforming you in your academic journey. So you have to include that. The question is, how do you do it and maintain academic integrity? I assure you, the Spirit of God has academic integrity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Candida, for your time and for sharing your expertise this afternoon. on this wonderful topic called alternative assignments and assessments. And just thank you for the pearls of wisdom that you shared with us. Again, I also want to thank Dr. Pieter Labuschagne for sharing with us some of the technicalities when it comes to assignment submission, assessments, feedback, and also how that feeds into this whole aspect of academic integrity. There are a few questions and some remarks in the chat box. Unfortunately, we ran out of time and we will not be able to cover that. But if there are comments that we can glean from and learn from, please take a note of that. And as Mrs. Michelle Kleinans mentioned earlier, that there will be a recording posted on our YouTube channel regarding this particular presentation this afternoon. So please register on our YouTube channel and be on the lookout for this particular presentation if you feel that you need to revisit it again in the future.